Hello, everyone, and welcome to the National Parents Union's Let's Get Real National Town Hall Series. I am super excited to be back with you guys. I'm Jason B. Allen, better known as Professor JBA, and I'm super excited for this year's series. Now, if you are viewing live, please go to the comment section, bring us greetings, let us know where you are. We want to hear from you, we want to be connected. We are super thankful for you to be connected to this conversation and, most importantly, to be connected to the work of the National Parents Union. Now, I cannot go any further without telling you guys that if you are not a member of the National Parents Union, please join us like immediately. Join the National Parents Union. Our information is at the bottom of the screen. We're doing some phenomenal work to amplify the voices of parents who are doing what they can to get better educational outcomes for our kids. Super excited about the conversations that are going to happen on this evening. And let me say this, if you do not know anything about NPU, where many may be talking the talk, we aren't just talking, we are doing the work. And so make sure you join the National Parents Union. We are so excited again about the conversation on this evening. Now, I am also excited to let you guys know that you won't just be hearing me run my mouth on this evening. We have a phenomenal, uh, very beautiful advocate who is going to be joining us on this evening and who is really going to help us drive this conversation. So, without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring on our guest moderator for the first edition of our Let's Get Real Town Hall series, Miss Tanya Winters. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself and tell the people a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and the phenomenal work that you're doing.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody, and thank you for joining us. Hello from Atlanta. I am Tanya Winters, and I am a 20-year veteran educator here in the Atlanta area. I am an advocate for families. I work with a local nonprofit doing the work of advocacy around families and family and community engagement. I'm a 20-year veteran educator who caught the very tail end of the Great Resignation. And I would venture to say it's probably added about 10 years back onto my life, not being in traffic, having the opportunity to fellowship with my mom, who was in her mid 80s, and just pop up and have lunch with my grandson. I'm the mother of three sons who have all ventured through post secondary education, but they are the reasons why I do this work. And I am so happy and honored that I get every day that I get to fight as hard for other families here in Georgia as I did for my three sons when they were matriculating through school. So thank you so much, Jason, for having me join you tonight.
Awesome. This is amazing. And it's so beautiful to see all of the greetings coming from all over the
I
nation,
know
getting
it.
connected to this conversation. Now, even though this is Tanya and I's first time moderating the Let's Get Real Town Hall series, we are no stranger to this work. 7:15 every Monday. I see some familiar faces who have heard us for the last couple of months, or me rather, talk about this in my corner. But we also are co-host of the I Win Morning Show, so we get a chance to really help empower families early in the morning, getting started with their day and really getting off on the right foot. Before we go any further, again, thank you guys for commenting and being engaged with the conversation. If you don't know, Tanya again just gave her introduction, but Tanya, if you could tell our viewers a little bit of why NPU is so important for families to get connected to.
Listen, I got involved with NPU maybe about 2 years ago, but more recently, we had a phenomenal Georgia Parent Week of Action right here in Georgia. We highlighted the importance of fathers being involved in family and community engagement and the advocacy. We hit the Capitol celebrating male educators in Atlanta, Black male educators. We focused on literacy for one
Yes.
thing. We focused on advocacy all over. Metro Atlanta. We welcomed so many community partners, and we did a couple of stints at the Capitol, a couple of days, and it was just phenomenal. We hosted some very deep and meaningful, impactful conversations. But one of the phenomenal things in the 20 years that I've been in education that has impressed me about National Parents Union has been the ability, and I do mean to swiftly galvanize throngs of support, moms, dads, grandparents, caregivers for any in any part of the country and for any educational, anything that impacts families with being able to pursue their equal and civil right to education. So that's one of the reasons I got involved. If you know me, you know I don't throw my weight around anything that I don't do or believe in. And so, very grateful to have had that experience with NPU. Been working with
I
Jason
love
for
it.
about 12 years in education, and just continuing to do the work that we love together has been a blessing.
Major shout out to all of our partners of NPU. Tanya isn't tooting her horn loud enough. The Atlanta Parent Week of Action was phenomenal with her leadership and our partners, DeAndrea, many of the parents who are logging in and bringing greetings this evening. But with the Georgia Parent Week of Action, with Tanya and the team that helped to really galvanize parents, we engaged almost 500 males and families in Georgia around educational advocacy. So the work is being done and it's being done intentional. So major shout out to parents who are really getting connected to NPU to help us drive this work. Now, we are sticklers about time and we want to be timely this evening. If you are driving and listening, viewing, if you are in the car and someone else is listening, thank you for your listening ears and viewing eyes. Now, we want to go ahead and get right into what we are here to do on this evening and start our fireside chat. We have two phenomenal speakers who are going to be on this evening. Welcome to you all. I want to pass the mic to Tanya, who will go ahead and let you guys bring greetings and then kick us off with our very first question.
Okay, we will start first with, well, Mary, you were first and we were already chatting. So I'll start first with you, Mary Jane Williams, if you would like to introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Debbie Myers.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And it's so great to see so many families joining us online tonight. Again, my name is Mary Jane Williams. I'm Executive Director of Family to Family Network. We're a 30-year parent organization in the greater Houston area. We really try to create success for kids with disability labels by empowering their families as they try to get services and support for their children within the education system, healthcare system, and of course the social service system. And we really believe that a good future is possible for kids with disabilities if they get the right supports and services. So we're really trying to guide families to that possibility for their kids. And thanks again for letting me come here and join in.
Thank you. Debbie?
Hi, can you do a thumbs up if you can hear me? I'm using my phone. Great,
Yes.
that's good to know. I could not use my computer. So I am a literacy advocate and a dyslexia advocate. And I came to this work because my son went to school and was not taught to read. And I had to do all sorts of work all on my own because no one else was really looking at this as we are today. And lots of changes are being made today. So I switched careers, in fact.
Wow.
And so my journey really started in this second career as a literacy expert because of my son. I consult now for the New York City Public Schools. We are providing extra support to a specific school in Harlem so they can serve dyslexic kids in their own neighborhood with public funding. And then I also consult for the Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children because we know Black children are often not at the center of these discussions. And I'm so glad that you all do put Black children at the center of these discussions. And I teach at Iona University in their literacy and English education department.
Funny, I graduated from Iona.
Oh, wow.
Connections here.
Small world.
Yeah.
I love this synergy, and I would love to be able to come and sit at the feet of both of you ladies with these impressive resumes that you touted and work that is a personal passion of mine. I started reading at an early age, and reading was very, very important in my family. But having been in education, you know that we are in an era now where they just don't focus on reading. So, hats off to you all for the work that you're doing. We're going to start with our first question. And Debbie, I'll go to you. What are, for those who are on the call who don't really understand when we talk about things in exceptional education, what are developmental disabilities?
Well, not only do we not talk about them, we get a lot of false information about them. And our government at a national level isn't helping so much with that because we have the CDC that has a list of developmental disabilities. We have the ADA, which looks at things from a civil rights view and kind of has their own list. And then we have the IDEA. The ADA, most people recognize that. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act. But the IDEA is often a mystery to parents. It's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So I'm going to try to explain all of that really quickly. And if you think about the word developmental is about growth. That's why a fundraising office is called the development office. They're trying to grow the funds for an organization. And it's also about the rate of growth. So, and some disabilities may hamper that rate of growth. And it's not just physical growth, it's your growth as a human being. So it's physical, it's your intellectual growth, it's your academic growth. So when you think about developmental, you want to think about all that kind of growth. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, highlights 5 major developmental disabilities and then gives us 3 overarching categories. The 5 that they highlight are attention issues, autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, Fragile X, and Tourette's. And then they give us 3 big groups: intellectual disability, language disorders, and learning disorders. And so then you have to start going down the rabbit hole and figure out what those are. So, an intellectual disability, it can be caused by injury or disease or infection. And it can happen before birth or after birth. It could be lead poisoning, or it could be Down syndrome. It could be fetal alcohol syndrome. It could be a traumatic brain injury. And so all these things can impact learning to speak, to walk, to dress, to eat, and learning in school totally. And then they have this group of language and speech disorders. And you're going to notice some of this overlaps with autism and the other things that they called out. Speech and language disorders that could be just general communication, receptive and expressive. To be articulation, which, might be stuttering like our president does. Might be just a delay. It's just developing really slowly. And with the right kind of therapy, it could go faster. Mm-hmm. There's something else called aphasia, which is hard to connect words in your brain. And that's voicing and intaking, listening. And it's a word thing. Or it could be an auditory processing thing, and that's sounds in your brain. So those are different things. And then we have our learning disorders. Dyslexia, and that's my expertise. Mm-hmm. Dyscalculia, some people call it dyscalculia, and dysgraphia. Dyslexia is kind of trouble with words. It's connecting the sounds and symbols on a page or the symbols on a page to the sounds that they make and what they turn into as syllables and words in your brain. Dyscalculia is trouble with numbers, and dysgraphia is trouble getting those words onto paper. Mm-hmm. And it kind of goes from your handwriting to actually organizing an essay or a paragraph. And all these are dealt with instruction, and really good instruction.
Wow. Debbie, thank you so much for that information. That was a lot. I know parents are like, I've heard some of this maybe before, and so we're going to be sharing websites and resources for you all to connect with. I will say this: the National Parents Union, nationalparentsunion.org, has all of these things. You can easily connect to it and really understand, wow, this is a lot. I want to challenge parents to also ask the question, are the teachers in my school really being trained around these things? So, just to give a little context, the fireside chat is to provide us with information as we go throughout this conversation so
Yeah.
we can all be on the same page. I also want to do this public service announcement and say that this entire series for this month is in celebration of National Learning Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. I want to
Mhm.
make sure that we all are aware of this because, again, we know better when we have resources and information. And so this is also us learning together. With that being said, Debbie, we want to go right to the second question so we can help get more information and resources to those who are viewing and for parents who may come back and say, wow, this was really resourceful for me. We have heard this question a lot from parents, and they struggle um, with this. The second question is, what is the difference between services and accommodations? There's a big discrepancy with parents understanding, wow, my child receives accommodations, but they also have services through the special education department. So we want to give you
All
that
right.
question to address the people.
Okay, so those are actually, is that to me or is that to,
Me?
It's for you, Mary.
okay,
I
you
know.
said my name at first, so.
This is always a complicated question for families, and they don't we don't. I didn't understand it when I first started, and it took me a little while. But there's accommodations, which is the letter A, and that's really how you access things in the classroom or and accommodations are like a calculator or even simple assistive technology. Whereas we call it modifications in Texas, and that's really about specialized instruction, and that's where you get those specialized services, whether that's through speech therapy or maybe a resource classroom where you're pulled out for individualized instruction in math or English or science. So that's where that specialized service comes from. And usually to obtain those specialized services or specialized instructions, you have to have an individualized education program or an IEP. Accommodations, though, can be for anybody. I saw a news thing the other day, and the SAT is going to online version with a calculator. Well, that's an accommodation. So, accommodations anyone can use. We all use them every day, just to make even the playing field and make life a little bit easier for people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I know we're getting a lot of comments from people really saying this is much needed information. So again, thank you guys so much for what you're doing. Tanya, I'll pass the mic back to you.
Okay, and I definitely want to direct everybody over to the chat. We have Tafshir is dropping the links for National Parents Union. Kelly Fields just dropped a really great free resource. Really great reading, offers free training and reading instructions. So I want us to pay attention to the chat. I was just over there trying to type and shout out so many people joining us from all over the country and say thank you for that. But let's go to our third question, and that's going to be to Debbie. Debbie, do you think that parents should advocate for all teachers to be trained and provide services and accommodations to all learners? Because, and I'll throw this in there, I think we learned a thing or two during COVID that more of us, and I'm saying us, need accommodations and have some letters that our mental wellness as well as our alertness and our intellect are attached to. And I think Mary already alluded to the changes they're making with the SAT. So should parents advocate for all teachers to be trained to be able to provide services to all students?
I think that is a complicated question as well. I don't think all schools are built for all learners, but we owe a free and appropriate education for all learners. And sometimes that's going to have to be in a specialized setting. For instance, a mildly dyslexic student should be able to thrive in a neighborhood school with a good response to intervention program. There's these words called tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and those are complicated and need their own definitions. Or they could thrive with some good special education. But if they're profoundly dyslexic, they might need a 12 to 1-to-1 setting all day long. Now, all teachers should be able to recognize when they can't get through to a child and be able to help that child to the social worker, who should be able to find the right setting for that child. It shouldn't be up to the family. The schools should be able to help with it. So
I hear you, and I have two things for that. One, and I know we have a time to keep, and we're on a charted path, but you said something that runs through my mind often. All schools are not built to educate all children. I want to put a little pin in that, and if we have a moment to come back to that,
Yes,
as
ma'am.
well as you stated another fact that what the structure should be, the teacher should be able to recognize and then refer to the social worker. We know that that's not happening. And so I would love for you all to continue to, if you can, drop some things that parents can do, just simple tools for them to be able to ignite that conversation, because the public school systems are overwhelmed.
Yes, they
Jason?
are. Well, all of our schools are overwhelmed. I will also say that speaking of pen, the resources are being pinned at the top of the comments. So if people need to connect and get those resources that are readily available, please make sure that you look at the comment area. It is pinned right at the top. We do have our last question for the fireside chat, and this is a very informative fireside chat, and want to thank both of you. And I want to go right to the last question of this segment, which is a powerhouse within itself. What's the difference between, and this may be really just the part that we are able to get to, but parents have definitely asked, what is the difference between an IEP and a 504? We have had a lot of situations where we have had to come out and advocate for parents to get resources that they need. And then the second part of that, Debbie, even if you have any resources you would like to share to Mary Ann's responses, a lot of parents are not aware of this. But the second part of the question is, does having a BIP, which is a behavior intervention plan, automatically mean that you have an IEP? So, Mary, we'll pass it over to you to address those.
So the basic difference is a Section 504 plan really comes from the Section 504 of the Civil Rights Act. And that just means that it's this umbrella category that makes sure that students with disabilities are not discriminated against. And basically, through the Section 504 plan, they are provided with accommodations. Often teachers don't have a lot of input into those accommodations. There might be a team at the school that works on those or discusses them. Hopefully the student is informed of those accommodations that they're suggesting, and that's the hardest part. Is Section 504 accommodation plan can be from kinder up through college, where you're going to have accommodations in college that just help you access all that information. Whereas an IEP means that you need some sort of modified curriculum or specialized instruction. So parents have rights and responsibilities in that IEP development. With a 504 plan, often parents don't have many rights, and if it's not implemented, it's really up to the student to make sure that they ask the teacher to have that accommodation. It's really great for self-advocacy training for students to understand those accommodations that they have and start to advocate for them. But also in public education, it's very hard for teachers to understand what those accommodations look like and how they might best work for kids. I know for my own son, he needed large print and a certain size, and I had a general ed teacher that came to me and asked, well, what does that look like? Because my son couldn't write at the time and we weren't using technology. And I said, well, give me the work and I'll go home and I'll make adaptations and you can see what it looks like. And once she saw what it looked like, even though he had an IEP, she was like, oh, I can do that. It's easy. So accommodations just help kids access that work in the classroom. But that specialized instruction is going to come in with an IEP with goals and objectives and, specialized instruction that as a parent, I really didn't know how to do. But those teachers do, and that's where their specialty is. And, you talked about, Jason, how schools are strapped right now. And I've really got to explain to parents that sometimes we're going to have to negotiate what those services, yes, our kids need everything, but we've got to really think about what are the 3 to 5 things that my kid needs to be successful this year and make progress, and really focus on those within your IEP so you have that specialized instruction if you need that specialized instruction. I know in Texas, if you don't speak the language, if you're low income, if you're Black or brown, you seem to be left out of the process, unfortunately. And Family to Family has really been trying to work with, diverse populations. We have tons of different cultures here, and they are being left out of the process for IEPs.
Yeah.
IEP, actually, you need to have a specific evaluation. As far as a BIP, Debbie really talked about it. There's a continuum of sort of services and this multi-tiered thing. There's behavior supports that can be implemented in a classroom for everybody, for every kid. And so maybe you'll have a behavior plan for a certain child, but it doesn't necessarily have to be with an IEP. It might be part of a 504 plan. But then for some children, they really need some intensive specialized instruction in behaviors and teaching them what to do versus just punishing them for what they didn't do. That's really what a behavior intervention plan is all about, being able to teach kids what they're supposed to do. I mean, my son, you could yell at him and tell him what not to do till you were blue in the face, but until you actually told him what to do, he would do it. But
Mary, I think that's all boys, but I'm just going to refrain. I raised 3 of them. You got to look them in the eye. I said, look me in the eye and read my lips. Do you understand me? And boys are just different than girls, even in educating and raising, 100%. Someone in the comments dropped that there's a good with understood.org, and I love Understood. I use it a lot when I was in education, that they have 10 differences between IEP and 504 plans and a day in our shoes. So really great responses from the audience, dropping in those nuggets. Thank you, Megan, for that. Tafshir is on it as well. And thank you all so much. While we're celebrating, this is also National Women's History Month. And I will say this, as I'm always honored to be on any panel with Jason, I'm honored to be able to have this fireside chat with these 2 powerful women who are bringing and bringing powerhouse advocacy to the forefront and really making a dent in this work. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. I wish we had more time. We need to part.
Kelly just mentioned something in here, and I meant to say it because I didn't write out what I was going to say. I just off the cuff. But she talked about having a functional behavior assessment, and I think that's really important. Whether you're going to have a behavior plan for a 504 or a behavior plan for an IEP, it really has to be based on some sort of formal assessment, not just somebody filling out some paperwork.
Yeah.
That's really good. Thank you so much for highlighting that. I also want to say that Kelly is a part of Georgia Can, which is in partnership with us and has collaborated with us. And we're so thankful and excited to have her share these resources in the chat. Again, thank you all for this amazing fireside chat. And we're going to transition to our next segment of this program. But again, everyone, please, in the comment section and You maybe can do a round of applause at home, but join us in thanking Debbie and Mary for such an impactful fireside chat. Thank you guys so much.
Jason, we need an applause button.
I was going to try to get the applause going, but that may that may take us too long. But thank you guys so much again.
Thank you so much for having this. I'm so honored.
Yes, we're going to prepare for a special announcement, but we want to again thank you guys so much for being on with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, you probably saw the announcement and you probably can see in my background, save the date. This town hall series this year is going to be phenomenal. Very excited because we are going to be having a conversation in May in celebration of, and we're going to put the flyer back up for you guys to save the date very quickly. Tuesday, May 7th, we want you to join us for our second edition of the Let's Get Real Town Hall series. Now, this is going to be in celebration of Women in Mathematics Day. Now, I don't know if anyone knows about this, but if you are truly a teacher that wants to engage your students, you have to talk about women in math and what they are doing. So join us for this conversation in May. It's going to be focusing in on financial literacy and numeracy. And let me say this. I know Tanya can attest to this. A lot of people will say we want to get to the bag and we want to see an increase in our finances. Well, we cannot do that without financial literacy and understanding the role that numeracy plays in all of these conversations. So without further ado, we are going to prepare for our panel discussion. We have an amazing lineup of panelists this evening, and we are super excited to bring them on at this time. So please join us with our guests for this evening on our panel. Super excited to see you guys and have you all on with us. Tanya, like before, I'll pass the mic to you to get us started with the panel discussion.
Hey, and very quickly before that, we have some viewers who are asking for the contact information for both Debbie and Mary. So if we can keep that in mind as we have these next three phenomenal people on, and I'm sure people want to contact them as well. So as you all are talking, if you want to drop your contact information yourselves over in the chat, feel free to do so. But we have amazing panelists tonight. For this panel discussion, and I'm going to call them in a one behind the other, and then in that order they can introduce themselves. We have Mr. Ashton Miner.
Good evening. Good evening.
Ms. Megan Beerley.
Good evening.
And Dr. Angela Jean-Louis.
Hello.
So I will leave it to them before we get started with the questions, and start with Ashton and ask them to introduce themselves and their work. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. My name is Ashton Miner. I am from Chicago. I am currently based in DC. I am a special education teacher at a high school in Southeast DC. I have been in education for about 10 years now, and this is my passion. This is my calling. Did not realize that special education was my calling because I always thought of myself as a college and career person, but special education is my calling because I feel it's very important for students to be heard, all students to be heard. And I also run an organization called Jacobs Puzzle Foundation, which is an organization dedicated to working with Black and Brown students with 504s and IEPs, working on their academic progress monitoring from their IEP goals. And we also do SEL immersion, college and career exposure, as well as doing incentive trips and personalized incentives to actually get them intrinsically motivated to actually progress towards their goals, towards academic mastery. And that's what I am, that's who I am, and that is what I do. I am so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to elevate my parents' voice, my students' voice, and just speak on special education policy.
Thank you. Megan?
Hi, I'm Megan Beerley. I'm a parent of a child with dyslexia. But before that started my journey into advocacy, I was a school psychologist for 15 years in Pennsylvania. And I moved to New Jersey, which is where I am now. About 5 years ago, my daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia. And I did not know, even as a school psychologist, what I didn't know until I traveled the journey as a parent. So that's led me on an advocacy journey for the last about 3.5 years and probably for the rest of my life. I will drop my contact information in, but I started a group called Read for New Jersey, and in a couple days, it was across the country. So I know this is a big issue. And I know tonight with the focus on literacy that a lot of you are interested in that. And so I'd love to connect and share more about what I do. But I work with Decoding Dyslexia, Learning Disabilities Association in New Jersey. I work with lots of groups. So I'm like a networker with all the groups around literacy and special education and connecting parents and raising our voices so we can support our children and our communities.
Well, listen, Megan, you have plenty of fans in the comments. We have Tafshir, Shirley, and Joshua shouting out Jersey. So you have your fans waving at you and supporting you. Dr.
I couldn't do it without them.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Dr. Angela Jean-Louis. I am, representing Atlanta, Georgia. I am a mother of 3 boys. One of my sons has dyslexia, and so this is very personal for me. I'm also a former professor and homeschool mom, and currently and also formerly an educational advocate. I started Leadership Concepts Institute in 2019, so I left academia as a professor because I saw all the gaps that were in the system as far as how it relates to our students that need the most. And so I wanted to put all that information together as a mom, as a parent that's personally dealing with dyslexia, and also as an educational advocate on the ground in Georgia and also Clayton County, as well as a professor. So I got all of the gaps. I saw all of the gaps once the students reached college level. So I started Leadership Concepts Institute in 2019, and we focus on social emotional learning courses and workshops, as well as trainings that focuses on equity, equity, cultural competency, and also social impact. I am also the creator of Leaning into Dyslexia and also Success for Our Sons curriculum. Thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
Listen, we have all-stars here tonight. I mean, the panel, from the fireside chat to the panel discussion, people are like, yes, we know you because we know your work in the community. And that's what makes NPU so special, because we're bringing people together and to the table who are actually experts and who are actually doing the work. Because again, a lot of people are talking the talk, but everyone isn't walking that walk. So Tanya, I'm going to pass the mic back to you so that we can start this conversation.
And listen, Dr. Angela did not mention how significant she was in a certain bill getting passed here in Georgia.
Oh, yes. Well, since the cat is out of the bag, we had the announcement during the Georgia Parent Week of Action that, and actually, Dr. Angela, I'll let you tell us a little bit more about that.
That's
so
important.
If you can spend a couple of seconds on it.
Okay, so I want to put the focus on, I'm not sure if she is in the group, but I know she texted me and said she would be here, but Tina Enberg, everyone knows her. She is one of the co-founders of Decoding Dyslexia, and it is through that program that I was able to be a community partner to get information actually from Tina. So Tina got all of the troops together and really was the push behind Senate Bill 48. And so that bill basically brought to Georgia, it's called the Dyslexic Law, and it brought to Georgia screeners and basically a whole different way, research-based, evidence-based literature to Georgia. And this is going to help all of the students. I know we didn't want it to just go up to third grade, but at least we got that. So what it says is that all students up until third grade are going to be screened for dyslexia. It also states, and this is very important, that we are now going to structured literacy. The research tells us this is the best way to teach not only children with dyslexia, but all children literacy skills. So I am so excited. We join other states that have gotten along into that whole arena on teaching children literacy correctly and also assisting in our literacy rate. So I am looking forward to seeing our uptick in that rate. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Tina and Decoding Dyslexia. And I am so
Tina's here. She's
Tina
here.
is
She's here. Hey, Tina. Shout out to you. And Quincy is over there too, Dr. Angela. He said, woo-hoo, that's my mom.
Yeah, that's my mom. Lots of shout outs. And again,
Yes,
Tina,
yes. And I
anytime
would
she
like to,
emails, calls, sends information, we're like, how many parents do you need? What do you need us to do? Where do we need
Right.
to be at?
yes,
And Dr.
yes,
Angela
yes.
will say, hey, can you rally the troops? Can you come here?
Yes.
Can you be here? And I'm like, okay, Tanya, can you share this? Andrea, can we get more parents connected?
Really
So I'm
rallied,
really excited
NPU
about
rallied the troops to help push
yes,
that.
and
Yes.
how people are coming together. Now, wanted to spend some time on that because that is parent power. That is the work that we do. We are so thankful for everyone that you've heard speak and share resources tonight. Tanya, let's get right into the conversation on this evening.
So let's dive into the first question. And wow, I really want to, I'm just going to ask it, and whoever answers it first, let's roll. What role does family history play in how children learn?
Go ahead, Dr. Angela. I'll let you go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going, okay, that's a nice question, but I can start. I can start with that. So when I think about that question, I think about two things. I think about the health side of it because of depression, dyslexia, ADHD, those things like that, or hereditary. So if parents see that in their family history as we are relating it to health, it is more likely than not that their kids are going to have some of those issues as well. So we need to be very cognitive of our history as a family. On the flip end, when you're talking about academic, the family is that first source, that first resource of academics as far as how a child sees learning. So when you're looking at that, the family plays an important role prior to the entrance of the school. So the parent sets the setting as far as how a student is going to look at learning. When you specifically look at children that need additional services, you have to look at the culture of a family. It's very important for families to understand what are the issues, the strengths, and the weaknesses of their children as it relates to learning. I have worked with several parents as well as nonprofits and other schools, and one of the issues that we have is that when the screener or whomever outlines or sees that their child may have a difficulty, let's say for dyslexia, because that's my area, in reading, sometimes the parents do not coalesce around the support services that child needs because the culture of the family does not support labels and things like that. So it's an array of areas that the family factors in. So I was just thinking about all of those holistic type of reasoning when we talk about families and their impact.
Yeah, I just kind of want to piggyback off of Dr. Angela because I think that's very important. Family history definitely does play a part in how a student learns. It's definitely a part of the proximity of how they learn. So if a student has not seen their parent or their family read a book, for example, or even read a newspaper outside of their phones, they wouldn't want to actually go about going above and beyond doing it themselves. And I think that just like Miss Debbie, excuse me, let me slow down. As Miss Debbie did mention that some dyslexia is a genetic trait. So if you are not diagnosed, you would not realize that you have it. And unfortunately, a lot of our students that are Black and brown, their families don't like labels, just like Dr. Angela stated. And if we don't like labels, we will never be able to actually identify or be able to actually diagnose a student that might have special ed or might need or learning disability or anything. And we don't find out until later on when they get to high school or they get to 8th grade and they're still reading on the 3rd grade level because they weren't introduced to reading on their own, or they were not introduced to math, or they're not introduced to exploring learning on their own. They're just they're literally just doing it because they have to. So the families are definitely a big part in that.
I guess the only thing I would add, I feel like they covered it, but just that lived experience and the value on education. So even just how they approach education, and how the kids would approach education in the classrooms, it was the only other thing I think I had that wasn't covered.
I love
Thank
that you
you all.
guys are covering, and look,
They
people are
covered
saying
and
well
smudged it.
said. They love it. I'm very impressed. I have been all evening.
Yeah.
I want to take us into the second question of this evening. And I think that this is something that a lot of people are going to want to know because, of course, thankfully, we are all here to be able to speak and collaborate and do this work. But unfortunately, during the pandemic, we lost so many parents, mothers, fathers, grandparents. So I want to ask us this question. I almost felt like I fell out of my chair thinking about what families and parents have gone through the last couple of years. And so this question is important because it leads us to this. How has learning loss during the pandemic impacted learners with disabilities? We know that it has impacted all of our children. But when we think about the special education departments across the nation, we know that there have already been challenges with how we're meeting the needs of exceptional learners. So, Megan, let's start with you and kind of go in the reverse order. How have you seen learning loss impact learners with disabilities?
I mean, I think it's really different for each child and what their needs are and what their experience was through the pandemic. I know for my daughter, because while she was in public school during the pandemic, she was not appropriately placed in public school to meet her needs for dyslexia. So her grouping, she found online learning to be more beneficial because she could mute her distractions. She could have a personal aide, me, sitting next to her and helping her through things. But I know that that was not the experience of all children. And we had children that didn't have access to live teaching. They didn't have access to a computer. They didn't have supports at home. In addition to all of the social, emotional, health, medical, just their basic care needs that children were struggling through during the pandemic. One of the big concerns when I think about the learning loss, I think there's a lot of research out there now, or a lot of articles and a lot of people looking into the research about what learning loss was during that time. But what I see from the parent side is when we after the pandemic first started talking about the learning loss, we were told that we had to give grace because everybody was affected. And now that we're a couple years out, we're being told that we also can't talk about it because it affected everybody and it was several years ago. And so now we need to give an excuse for it the other way, which is getting really frustrating. And as we do that, what I'm seeing, especially with some of our older kids now, is that the expectations are being lowered versus how do we increase our supports to get them to where they should have been or would have been had we not gone through the pandemic. I see lowering of expectations and that not only affecting them academically, but affecting, future goals and their future success, as well as the social emotional impact that has when they're struggling and they can do more, they know they can do more, and they don't have access to the education to build those skills.
Wow. Dr. Angela, let's go to you.
Well, when you talk about statistics, the National Institute of Health states that 87% of parents have stated that their child has severe loss, academic loss. But we know that within those numbers are the confines of special education. And so that's even the number is even higher on that part. One of the things I want us to focus on is the fact that the backlog of evaluations were hurt. So now we're trying to catch up with that. So you had the issue with evaluations, referrals, and screenings and things like that, because none of us were ready for the pandemic, right? So that has caused some loss as well, because now you have children going to grades, and there's a backlog of them getting the supports and services that they need. Another thing is interesting on my end as a professor. I was full-time tenure track online. And so I was the trainers as far as academic. We all went into public education, public higher education went to online in 2008. I'm telling my age here. And so I was one of the people that had to train to train the professors. And one of the things I will tell you is that teaching online, and I'm sure a lot of the teachers that are on here now will attest to that, it's very hard. I mean, for me to teach online and to train other people, I had 2 certifications. One from the department, both from University of Georgia at the education part. So those are the 2 things, like not knowing how to teach online and to put community together in order for students to learn is very detrimental. I want to add to that. In no specific way am I pointing my fingers at the teachers, because I taught other professors and I know how hard that can be to pivot that quickly. So those are the 2 things that I think we need to look at post pandemic, is like we need to get the teachers prepared for anything that happens like that. Get them trained for online learning, and also pay attention to the backlog of evaluation assessment. So we need to possibly have more people in that area to get us back to the levels that we need to be.
Now, kind of going on to that, Dr. Angela, I like the fact that you brought up that it's a backlog of screenings. And I think that kind of goes to the fact that federal funding for special education is not being delivered and actually given to the schools to actually do what they need to do to hire the aides, to hire the psychologists, to hire the assessors who actually ensure that these students are actually evaluated in a timely manner to ensure that we can actually give them the services that they need. But when we speak of the learning laws, prior to the pandemic, when I was working in the administrative side, so I wasn't in the actual classroom before the pandemic. But from the students that I did work with, they were receiving the services because they did have the aids, they did have the tools in front of them. During the pandemic, there was a shift with everybody. And kind of piggybacking on the fact of resources, some families didn't have the technological advances of some other neighborhoods or some other districts. So people had to use their phones, some people had to use tablets. And not every student in every school district will have the ability to do so, to be able to log onto Canvas or to log onto whatever platform to get the work done. And when you're on the computer all day, we have assessments like iReady, ANET, and other tools that we use to monitor their growth. But if you're on a computer all day, you're just going to do whatever you can to make sure you're passing those levels. But when you come back in person, and I'm looking at you try to read, you can't read because all you were doing is guessing until it was done. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed in the learning loss is that when our students were in front of technology or computers, they're just scrolling, they're just pressing buttons, but they're missing that in-person touch. And as a special education teacher who came in during the pandemic, I can tell that the students really needed that one-on-one, that they needed to build that relational trust, because I could see you on a computer all day long. Other people on the screen on Instagram all day long. What's the difference between you and the teacher? Nothing. But when I'm in front of you, I can actually break down the words for you. I can actually break down and actually help you comprehend what the question is actually asking you, versus you just trying to figure out and just drag and drop this to get past to the 3rd grade. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed, that the SAEL, the peer-to-peer, the teacher-to-peer, the teacher-to-teacher, because that also plays a part in that too. The morale with teachers, and after, during, and post-pandemic is very much so. You might be sick. I don't know if I could be around you. And So the teachers will leave, they'll be out for 3 weeks because they're sick, and so you have some substitute in front of them. Those students wouldn't know who they are, so they don't want to learn from you because they don't know you. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned about the family history. If a family is in a situation where they are worried about the internet, the lights, the clothes, the food, again, I cannot assume, as a district, I cannot assume you have internet. I'm going to, because we live in the 21st century, but I should not assume that you have those access to those things to actually ensure that you can get what you need, get the learning and the expertise that you actually need. So that's something I've noticed in learning loss during the pandemic.
Can I
I saw
piggyback?
Tony go
Can,
ahead.
can I
Dr.
piggyback on that? Yeah, I think those are great points, and just on an impersonal side or a personal side of just talking with students, talking to my sons and their friends, that is something that they dealt with because of the issue that the teacher had issues with learning online, and not all students knew how to learn online. So to piggyback on that, you have grade inflation. So you have some students that receive grades because the teachers felt bad, possibly like, I didn't know what I was doing, I don't want to hurt the student. And so now some of my colleagues are seeing those children during the pandemic come into the college setting, and they're not ready, they're not prepared. And some of this is showing up on the college level with the learning loss.
Listen, we're going to go on to this next question, but if you saw me just kind of rubbing my face, I felt so triggered. I went into the comments, I was listening to you all, and I felt triggered back to all that we had to do in the pandemic. And I'll say this, I was working in family and community engagement for a local district at the district level. We started calling parents because we were missing so many children, knocking on doors with masks on, looking for our babies. I had so many parents tell me, I am at work, I don't understand how to operate the computer, we've had too many struggles getting online. They will be back in school when school opens up. That's it. I'm sorry, I wish I could do better, but I can't. And that was it. And so there were thousands of families like that. And just reading some of the comments, ask about ESSER funding and all the funds that were supposed to go to tutoring. I know personally in the district I worked in, it didn't happen. And so many other districts. So let me not belabor the point. Oh, I felt so triggered. And then it was something about right brain learners being more impacted.
Yes.
And I was like, honey, right brain children and adults.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, next question. Thank you all for that. Such rich conversation tonight. In your opinion, should every child have an individualized learning plan based on their learning style? And let me add something else to that. Should teachers who are being brought into the educational system, should that be a part of their learning and practice to be able to identify learning styles?
I would like to just go ahead and just say that
Come on, Ashley.
as the teacher, I think that it is very important that every single teacher that enters the profession, not teachers, educators, admin, and in-person instructional, should be taught, trained, and retrained on how to evaluate, how to identify, and how to assist students that have a learning disability, whether that be dyslexia, ADHD, autism, emotional behavior support. I think it should run the gamut. Now, to answer the question, do I think that every student needs an individualized learning plan? No. And I say that because it sounds very selfish, but that's what makes special education special, is the fact that I do have an IEP that does identify and say that I have these deficits in reading, I have these deficits in writing, I need support in regulating my behavior. I think that's important for students as they transition from elementary to middle school to high school to college and beyond. I think that's important. Now, if I'm thinking that little Johnny in the playground who's in the 4th grade, who's being a bad student, do I think he needs a behavior plan? No. Do I think he needs a talking to? Absolutely. Like, little Johnny, why did you hit little Eric? You know you shouldn't have. I don't think that little Johnny needs an IEP or a 504. He might need a behavior support plan, But that's something that's different than an IEP. An IEP is an individualized education plan that sets forth for all those that are working with the student to ensure that they're getting the academic supports that they need, whether that be modifications to assignments, whether that be accommodations during state testing, whether that be occupational therapy to ensure they can space and actually write out things and not just type it. That means that you're actually assisting and working with the student to actually help them progress, master, and overcome anything that's holding them back academically and challenging them. I think that's what we do need to identify those students, i.e. going back to the backlogging. If I have to go back to my psychologist who's 10 kids behind and it takes a month to assess them, that's a whole nother issue. But do I believe that every student needs one? No. I think learning style is how we all have learned. At least that's how I learned. I should have had an IEP, but I didn't have an IEP growing up. But I'm a visual learner. Some students are visual learners. Some students are kinetic learners. So I think that's different. I think it's different if you group them based off of learning styles. Although I did see in the chat, it's a myth. Don't disagree, but that's a conversation for after the chat. But I think that if you're a visual learner, if you're a visual, kinetic, audio learner, I think you could group students like that, but that kind of goes into the small groups. And that's what students and teachers and educators need to remember. Like, small group instruction is probably going to be our best bet moving forward past the pandemic and moving on.
Thank you. Yeah, the chat is lit up, honey, but let's next. Anybody else want to tackle that question?
I was going to say, I'll piggyback there too, that as a school psychologist, I did not have the training that I needed to identify dyslexia. And I'll be honest, I was actually the gatekeeper to shut down that dyslexia conversation. So karma got me. I understand now. And when I went through this journey with my daughter and realizing that she was getting the things that I used to recommend as a school psychologist and getting those services, she was not making progress. So when you bring it back to, so piggyback on that, we need our teachers and our educators, because I think it really needs to come from the top down. We can train our teachers, and I've worked with school districts that have trained their teachers. If they don't have administrators that can support the learning that they've done with the appropriate schedules, the tools, the appropriate groupings, they can't be effective whether they're trained or not. So we need to have that top tier trained and understanding as well. And then in terms of every child getting an IEP, I mean, small groups, we know, like you said, it's just, all kids are going to do better in small groups, right? When we can individualize and tailor things. But if we're looking at a classroom where we feel like everybody needs an IEP, we need to bring it back to it's a tier 1 issue. And I think that is what we're facing with literacy. We need to revamp what we provide in tier 1, which is, for the parents that don't know that terminology, that's what every child in the general education classroom gets. We need to improve our reading instruction and how we teach, especially in the area of literacy, but there's lots of other things we could improve on too. But specifically in literacy, we need to improve how we teach and align that to evidence-based practice. And we might not have the need for as many IEPs or the backlog of the evaluations, because some of these evaluations are curriculum casualties, or they'll say behavioral issues. I know that many kids with dyslexia start to present with behavioral or emotional issues when they're not receiving appropriate instruction in reading. And when they get that and they start finding success, the emotional and behavioral issues subside.
And so what I'm hearing is that small group is a general IEP, if you will, because you're able to get to more children in smaller groups. And one of the key issues is the large classroom settings. That you are forcing teachers, you're overwhelming the teacher, which is why they are leaving the profession with all of these, with too many children, and then the everything else that they have to deal with. And so Dr. Angela, did you want to answer next? Because I was about to get on my soapbox.
That's okay. Yes, I wanted to focus on noting that IEP and ILP are two different things. So IEP is mandated federal law, what a parent would have their child with dyslexia or ADHD and things like that. It's the educational plan, although they attach it to workforce and being able to have the necessary life skills. An individual learning plan is one that is conceptually rooted in training, in specific training. So an individual learning plan is one in which it teaches children to have the connection between their education and also a thriving workforce. So those are two very different things. If parents want to, I wish I had I'm actually on my phone, so I have it on my computer, but I couldn't get to it. But if you email me, I could give you information, or you could go to the Department of Labor, and then put in individual learning plan, or you could just email me, whatever. But if you go to Department of Labor and put in individual learning plan, they will give you a checklist, what every child needs to have an effective learning plan. And you will see there examples such as testing to identify what the child is interested in as far as career-wise, and then some of the steps that the parents can make sure that the student does. For example, are there vocational classes that the child can take? Now, where my children go to school, they get tested for career, to see what type of career ready or interest there are. And then there are vocational classes. It varies per state, but I would suggest all parents listening, and tell as many people as you can that they have this example of an individualized learning plan, and you can actually take it to your school and work with your school on providing that. I looked at it and I think it's great. I think it's a great template for all parents to use. But there's a difference between IEP and ILP. I just wanted to say that.
This is phenomenal. We're sharing the comments from people. And again, thank you for all of our allies, our NPU staff members and leaders who are sharing resources. And Lauren, I am reading your comment that you needed this 2 weeks ago in the due process. I've heard from parents in Detroit and just other places across the nation leading up to this. And we're like, oh my God, we're trying to wait on this conversation, but we need this support right now. So when people may not think that these things are needed, it definitely is. Tanya, thank you for really leading us throughout this. And I've got to say that we have one more question for the panel. And it's a light question, guys, because we came to have a really deep conversation, and most importantly, you all have provided, you guys did above and beyond. We said please share strategies and solutions, and that again is what makes us unique, because yes, we know that there are thousands of problems, but at the end of the day, how do you help us get to solutions? And I tell you, from the fireside chat to now, if everybody doesn't have at least 2 solutions, then maybe you were on mute and didn't hear us, but they have been driving it. I want to go to the last question for this segment and really address something that has, as we are here in DC celebrating National SEL Week and advocating for the social emotional learning of our children, I have had to inform fellow advocates and legislators that we cannot have this conversation and not think about the impact of social emotional learning on those students in special education, specifically around bullying and around the stigma that special education carries. So how can we collectively begin to erase the stigma around special education and learning differences? Anyone who wants to jump in, please feel free to do so.
I'll let the ladies go first.
Okay, so this is an interesting question, because I talk to my son all the time about this, and he was just telling me the other day, as far as he did not see anyone that looks like him. He's in school to be a doctor. He's in chiropractic school to follow in his father's footsteps, my husband's footsteps, and he just didn't see anyone like him, meaning someone that has dyslexia that is a doctor, or someone, he just didn't see that. And he stated to me when we were talking about, what helped you get to where you are outside of what we did as a family. And I want to integrate these things. And I hope parents can utilize this, because this is actually from the word of someone that has dyslexia. And one of the things we could do when we talk about special education is that we need to outline and have representation, different type of representation that shows students that are in law school, students that are in medical schools, students that are, managers at Walmart, students that have ADHD with special education, students that have dyslexia, or just an array of things that go under the umbrella of special education. Special education is looked at, like the joke says, the short bus, right? The poster child of special education is a child like my sister. My sister developed no further than 18 months. And she's 2 years older than me. She was 54, but her development never rose outside of 18 months. She rode in the short bus. And I think that is the poster child for special education. To take the stigma out, we need to have more representation. That's with any group. When we talk about on the screen, when we talk about as teachers, that you need representation. So you need to see different people and different areas of special education, and not have that as a poster child. The second thing, these are strategies for parents. What we did with my son is that the way we use special education was like this. We focused on the label. So we got to get rid of that, right? We need a label. If you had cancer, you would label it. You would not go around and say, well, I'm not going to label it. Okay, so let's get out of that. So you label it, right? So we always label dyslexia. Okay, this is what you do. These are the strategies for dyslexia. Now you need to go get your services in special education. So we always labeled that. And I asked him the other day, I said, what did that do for you? Did that do anything? Because in our mind, it was a strategy. And he said, you know what, Mom? It made me have less of a focus of difference. Less of a focus of difference. You see what I did? Special education is a place to go to receive help. You see, I turned that into a positive wording. So parents, you can say special education, but not make it the boogeyman. Make it always frame it as something that they go to and get help. And it's wonderful and it's great. But the label is the label, because they need to know the label. If you don't have a name for anything, you can't do the blueprint. So that's my 2 cents in that.
That I agree with everything you said. I think the label is a huge factor. I know I talked when going through it with my own daughter, as well as students and parents that I've worked with over the years. Not giving it a label, the children know. Giving it a label, you can literally see them relax and understand that it's not about effort. It's not about paying attention. It's not about something that they're doing. It's that they have a need. And so using the term to special needs, that you have a need that is different than everybody else in your class. And you need something different. So going to that place to get that something different. And I guess kind of more globally or more at the surface level, when thinking about this question, I think like any stigma that we approach, we need to go into that with thinking about how do we connect. And I think building relationships, and having people understand your child or understand the learning differences, it makes a big difference if the social group that your child's a part of can connect and have a group, even if it's a small friend group, not the whole class or whatever is comfortable for your kid at the time, but have a group of friends and peers that understand that they learn differently and accept them anyway. And then building that, continuing to build that. I really think that it all starts with connection, coming from a place of being curious and wanting to understand, and us as parents and educators doing that and showing that with our kids, regardless of what age they are.
So I just wanted to add to everything that everyone has already said. I think that we have to first take the label off of it by calling it an exceptionality. Students with exceptionalities. I think if we continuously put special education, or if we put students with disabilities, I think that already puts a label of disabled, that you aren't able to do anything. But if you have an exceptionality, I'm exceptionally gifted at this, this, and this. And I believe I saw in the question earlier that Monica asked, is gifted and talented a part of SPED? And technically it is. It's its own category of special education, but it is a part of special ed.
Yes.
And I think I can identify with this. I am a student that is special education. I was not identified when I was in school. I went through my entire life without recognizing. I knew something was different, but I did not know, because Ashton always showed up on the gifted and talented side, because I learned quick. I was able to be very productive. I was not challenged intellectually or academically until I was put in particular environments that made me show up academically and show up to actually meet that rigor expectation that my teachers gave for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until I became an adult where I recognized that, no, I do have a learning disability, and I have multiple. So it wasn't until I became an adult where I said, let me actually go get this tested. Let me go see if this is actually a thing for me. And sure enough, it was. So I think removing that label is very important. I don't speak on my own struggles myself at all, barely ever. But I'm starting to recognize that when you show your students who you are, they really, really learn from you, because they're always watching. And it took me this school year actually to actually speak to my students, my 12th and my 10th grade students. And I said, hey, y'all, so this is who it is. Mr. Minor, I have a learning disability, right? I do have ADHD. So if you all see me in the morning and you see I'm like, my mind is really going, I'm jittery, I'm doing it, it's either because the coffee kicked in and or our meds kicked in. Or if you see me take a deep breath, like you all actually noticed me earlier in the segment.
Yeah.
You have to take a deep breath, because to remember, like, take a deep breath, don't go so fast. And that's a symptom of a couple of different things. So I think for me, recognizing that label or recognizing who I am helped my students recognize who they were, because I've had students say, yo, Mr. Minor, I take deep breaths now. Yo, Mr. Minor, I actually do that. Like, it makes sense how some things, because they are watching you. And being the only Black male special education teacher that is SPED, that teaches SPED, that is degreed in SPED, that understands SPED, I think that they identify with that. And I think that's very important by, again, erasing the label, showing them, no, I'm a person too. I didn't get recognized until I was an adult. I didn't like reading until I started reading Archie, until I read Harry Potter, until I read John Grisham. That level of progress I put myself in, because I was like, yo, I enjoy this. I got to escape out of my current role, which wasn't not bad, but it wasn't the most productive. And I got to explore the world around me. So giving those students the opportunity to explore the world around them by giving them the exposure to those things, exposure to people that look different, talk different, speak different, eat different, act different. I think that exposure, it makes all the difference in the world. And I think that if you keep a student siloed their entire lives, i.e. in a virtual setting, virtual learning, they will never get to actually have that peer-to-peer interaction of someone who looks different, because all I know is my family, who doesn't know how to read my IEP to actually ensure that I can get the services that I do need. So it's really about removing that label, but also having those honest conversations with those students as well. I teach a self-contained class. So I've had one-on-one conversations with my students that said, hey, do you know what this is? Do you know what this IEP is? Do you know why I actually called you into this meeting? Because we're now making decisions for you, but you have a voice. At 14, 15, you can actually have a voice in the transition services that you want. You can actually, this is the label, but you are not that. You and I both know you read higher than the 3rd grade level. You read at the 10th grade level. But those students don't want to recognize that they have it. That's another conversation too. But I think also when you have a student that knows what their classification is, that knows what services they're supposed to get, because their parents, their teachers, and their community and their village around them expose them to that, they have a better time advocating for themselves. And I think that's the biggest thing for students with exceptionalities, is teaching them how to advocate for themselves, because no one's going to do it for you but yourself, i.e. me. So yes.
I want to thank you guys so much for
Yes,
this
thank you
powerful
so much.
conversation.
Oh,
It has been very special, and I did not realize I had so many. I come from a family of educators, and so my cousin has responded and said that she loves the language around being a neurodivergent because I am neurodivergent, and I can relate to Ashton. It's my superpower, just learning to navigate the difference and being transparent, about it. Ashton is also my cousin, and so it's interesting to see how we are invested in doing
wow.
this work. I am also dual exceptional, and so a lot of the things that you have heard that Ashton has spoke to, having a speech impediment, which is mind blowing because when my students were like, Mr. Allen, you stuttered and you weren't able to articulate your words and to see what I do now, they're like, I can do this. And so being able to connect with my students every year, I opened up with that and it changed the dynamic. I never had discipline problems. I always had rooms full of students because students wanted to be in my space. And so I think that what teachers can do is relate to students and let them know that we do all learn differently. And I want to thank you guys for highlighting the importance of that and just all of the beautiful testimonies in the comment section. I am just wowed at people's experiences that they are sharing. So again, to this panel, thank you so much for what you are doing, for your work. We are honored to have had you on for this time. And as we get ready to close out, we're going to end with a policy corner to really help make sure that we
Come on, Policy Corner.
everyone. So now, listen, guys, special announcement. If you did not get the link inside of the comment section, please make sure that you do that immediately because we are wanting to make sure you're connected to the next conversation that's coming up. Now, Tanya, we are ready for the policy corner, and I'm gonna go ahead and just kick it over to you because you're on it tonight. So,
Kulia, where is Ashara? Hey guys, listen, we got so much information tonight, and thank you all for sharing everything from the beginning. But these ladies, these wonderful and amazing women, are going to talk about the thing that just gets me fired up, and that is policy. How we take this information we learned tonight and roll it into impactful change. So, without further ado, Miss Ariel Taylor Smith, Miss Kulia Pringle, and Marin Christopher. Is Marin on?
She's coming, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, Marin is coming. So, ladies, please introduce yourselves, and then we'll talk about policy. Ariel?
I can go. Kulia Pringle. I am Kulia Pringle, and I'm the Minnesota State Director for the National Parents Union.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ariel Taylor Smith, and I'm the Senior Director of Policy and Action at the National Parents Union. And in another life, I also was a special education teacher and still have a special education teaching license. Good to see everyone tonight.
Well, we're going to jump right in and ask for the NPU policy updates and highlights.
I'm so happy you asked. We have some exciting new things we're working on at the National Parents Union. You may have seen we just launched a new campaign called Read to Rise. I practiced this because I wasn't sure which side this is going to be on. Read to Rise. Which calls for evidence-based strategies for teaching kids to read. As many of our panelists have mentioned tonight, one of the biggest failures in our education system right now is the fact that we're using flawed curriculum and teaching strategies to teach kids to read. And we know that states across the country have adopted policy changes to mitigate those issues with teaching kids to read. And those policies include things like changing curriculum to be evidence-based curriculum, as they did in Georgia, requiring additional professional development for teachers, and providing students with additional general education tiered supports. And so we know that that's really important when we've seen states like Minnesota, which Kulia will talk about, take action to ensure that all kids are learning to read. But the National Parents Union has decided to take this fight to Capitol Hill because we believe that while it's a great thing that our states are adopting policies to change and adapt to the science of reading, we think that that's moving too slow, and we think that it's happening at a different pace in every state, and we think that this is a national issue that deserves federal attention. And so our Read to Rise campaign is a campaign that calls for federal action on addressing our nation's literacy crisis. I'm very excited about it.
Thank you so much, Ariel. And now we'll go to Kulia.
Yeah, so we had numerous amounts of legislative wins last session, and looking forward to some this session as well. One of them would be the READ Act, and I wanted to touch on the ban on recess as a discipline, because we found a lot of special education students were in this category of USES being used as a discipline for things that are in their IEP. So we got a win last session, and when Maren jumps on, she'll talk more in detail about that. But I'm very excited about the READ Act, and we are actually in the process of READ Act 2.0, which is going to go even further than the READ Act. It does provide, as Ariel said, for money for districts to change their curriculum to evidence-based structured literacy. It provides for professional development for teachers. And then I do want to touch on, prior to our last session, our legislative passed a $30 million bill to provide teachers with professional development in letters training. So the READ Act goes even further than and says that teachers can take professional development around evidence-based structured literacy, because letters training is over 100 and something hours long, and there is no payments for teachers or salary for teachers to take this training. So they provide for professional development, and it's just a robust literacy policy that I'm very excited about. Like I said, I'm excited that we're getting READ Act 2.0, which is going to include pre-K, all folks that touch children, including paraprofessionals, everybody that touch children. And I'm also excited about a bill that me and Ariel crafted to extend that to out of school time organizations that have children who may, seek some homework help or have some sort of academic component, but they aren't educated in the science of reading. So we are still going on this literacy policy journey, and I'm just excited.
Listen, no one on here is tooting their horn loud at all. That when I tell you that these ladies are lighting up the policy world, and Kulia is lighting up Minnesota, I feel like when you look up Minnesota, there should be a picture of Kulia right there next to Minnesota. Because when I tell you that she is giving Minnesota the business and advocating firmly and stealthily for families and for reading, I love it. I keep saying reading is personal for me and it's passionate. But the first question that I have while we're waiting on Maren is, what policies support students when their accommodations are not met? Ariel, if you want to take that question first, or if you both want to, but
Yes. Thank you. That's a really important question. I saw in the chat earlier, someone asked a question about the differences between an IEP and a 504 plan. And so I just want to start there and talk a little bit about the differences between an IEP and a 504 plan. So an individual education program, or an IEP, is a comprehensive, legally binding document that outlines specific services, accommodations, and goals that are tailored to meet your child's unique needs. And a 504 plan provides accommodation and modifications to ensure that students with disabilities have equal access to education, but it's not as detailed or legally binding as an IEP. And so those are the two structures of support that parents can ask for when their student is struggling in school. And it's really important that parents are actively participating, as we've talked about throughout this. But it's not only important, but it's actually your right to be informed about the IEP and 504 process. And one thing that I just wanted to make sure to uplift as we're thinking about this, well, there's two things. The first is something called prior written notice. Prior written notice is parent and family's right to receive written notification before any significant changes are made to your student's IEP or 504 plan. And this is really important because it ensures transparency and gives you an opportunity to fully understand and discuss any proposed modifications. And so if you receive a prior written notice, it's really important that you review those notices carefully and seek clarification from the school if you have questions. It's all within your rights. Another thing that comes up a lot when I engage with families who are struggling with their school's implementation of their IEP is access to records and information. Parents have the right to review their child's educational records, including their IEPs and 504 plans. You have the right to request copies if needed, and it's important that your school produce those copies and produces records of your child's progress, which is another thing that I think parents sometimes struggle to get information from their school on.
Yeah.
But know that access to records and prior written notice before there's changes to your students' IEPs are important things that parents have the right to be notified about. And lastly, I think it's just really important. And I know there was another panelist earlier that said this, but parents have due process rights when it comes to formulating your student's IEP or 504. If you have a disagreement with your school district regarding your child's education, you have the right to initiate a due process hearing. Different districts have different appeal processes, but this is a formal procedure that provides a platform for resolving disputes and ensuring that your concerns are addressed in a fair and impartial manner. And so that's sort of the things that you have at a school level. And I do want to just say that in addition to that, if your school continues to fail to implement your student's IEP, you do have a course of action within the Office of Civil Rights, which is the department within the Department of Education. Thanks. Sorry.
That was the answer I think that everybody wanted to know. Kulia, I want to jump to you. I'm actually going to popcorn from the comment section just to keep this a little spicy. Kulia, what are options when parents ask for students to be tested, but they are denied?
That is a good question. I think Ariel's probably best to answer that, and so is Marin. I'm not quite sure about the special education laws when it comes to asking for testing. Ariel, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, if your student is just demonstrating a lack of progress in multiple areas, you have the right to ask for an evaluation. And if your school is not giving you an evaluation, you certainly have the right to appeal that. And if that's something that's happening to you as an individual parent, please do reach out to us. We're happy to support you through that.
And I love Kelly's response that the district must provide an explanation of why they are denying the parent request for an evaluation. And if you request this, parents, as a former district administrator, and they will use the excuse of, oh, we are so backed up, that's fine. You can have as many excuses as you want, but your best bet is to contact organizations like MPU to help move it forward to the next level. And I think our special guest has been able to make it, so she may be able to chime in. But we are going to round us out with one more question to really get parents some resources and answers that they need. Hi.
Hey, Mary.
Hello. Sorry for the delay. Thanks for your patience.
It's totally okay. Listen, I meant to also tell everyone that these dynamic people joined us for the Let's Get Real Parent Workshop, where we actually went more in depth into how parents can get connected to resources and just things that they needed to know. So I definitely want to thank both Marion and Kulia for all of the resources that they provided. Marion, we're going to jump right into the conversation. We're talking about policy. Can you tell the people who you are, where you're from, and some of the amazing things that you've been able to do?
Sure. I'm happy to introduce myself. Well, first of all, my name is Marin Christensen-Hofer, and as you can see, I'm joining you from my car right now. I work for a nonprofit organization called the Multicultural Autism Action Network. And we are a nonprofit that was formed by parents of children with disabilities from the Somali and African American communities here in Minnesota. And the whole idea behind the organization is really to support families of children with disabilities in navigating supports for their kids. We do a lot of work with one-to-one support. We do Somali and Oromo language support groups. And we also do quite a bit of legislative activity. You mentioned some of the things that we've worked on. Like last year, we brought forth a bill that would address the practice of withholding recess as a form of punishment in Minnesota. And that is now prohibited, except under very limited circumstances. We've worked on some bonding bills to create inclusive and accessible playgrounds in a number of Minnesota cities. We've worked a lot on discipline issues, especially around seclusion and restraint practices in Minnesota. A lot of discussion about disproportionality towards our disciplinary procedures, and Minnesota's track record is not great when it comes to how we disproportionately punish students with disabilities, students of color, and especially students with both identities. So those are some of the things that we really care about. We want to make the whole process more accessible to parents, and we want to bring people's voices to the table and kind of smooth that path for all parents to participate in the process.
So,
And as you can see,
go ahead,
Jason,
Kulia.
I was just going to say, as you can see, whenever there's a special education question that I don't know, we have two Marins. I either call Marin Christensen or Marin Holden from the Legal Disability Center. They are my go-tos when I have anything or need an answer to a special education question.
Well, first of all, Mara came in and then she answered the next question in her introduction. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess have a great evening and thank you for.
But honey,
But that was
Kelly
so
has been
phenomenal.
answering that question also. The chat has been lighting up
Yes.
with the tools of how parents can actually
Can hold
hold
schools
schools
accountable.
accountable.
So you
So
guys were right in sync with what parents
yeah,
have been asking. I want to also highlight and say that a lot of the questions come from parents and what they're wanting to see. Some people may know, there are many others who do not. So I want to give you guys just some final thoughts. I know that we are well into the 8 o'clock hour now. So Kulia, Marin, Ariel, if you guys want to give any final thoughts before we close out the Let's Get Real first edition.
I could start. I just want to say that the wheels of justice move slow. Policy is slow and sometimes ugly. But I encourage and begging parents to get involved with an organization locally or get involved with National Parents Union, organizations that are actually trying to transform policies, practices for children, all children, but we know that there's disproportionality and disparities that exist when it comes to children of color, and especially if they have an intersectionality of a disability. So I am just urging parents to please, sometimes it's just you joining the organization and putting your name and email on a petition list or putting your name and email into a email blast to your legislators. We try to make it as easy as possible because we know it is slow and we know that, it's time consuming and folks don't have the luxury of spending the day at the Capitol when they have children to feed. So that is my last thoughts.
Yeah, if I could add just a brief comment onto that too. I think what Kulia said is so important. We're all about helping parents access services, and we're also about changing the systems that make it so hard to get services to begin with. So we really need to work on those things at the same time. And what she said about working together, I think is so incredibly important. We talk about this work as being part of a choir. If you need to step out and take a breath, your people on either side can cover for you. And that's why we really need each other to be working on these things together. Nobody changes a law alone, but it all starts with a story and something not going the way it's supposed to, and people just being really committed to doing better and making it work together.
Ariel.
Yeah, I that's exactly right. Get involved, stay involved, know that you're not alone in this. I know that sometimes, especially navigating special education processes, it can feel really lonely and feel really scary for families. And organizations like National Parents Union exist to support you. And so please reach out, ask questions. There's so many brilliant parents offering so many good suggestions in the chat. It just goes to show what a strong community we have at National Parents Union, and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
This has
Awesome.
been
Everyone,
phenomenal,
listen,
Jason.
that was the comments are
Honey,
comments are
I
coming
can't because
tonight.
I feel like I'm in a tennis match. I'm trying to stay focused. I'm looking at the comments. I'm like,
But it's really good. We love the engagement. Join us in thanking this policy corner again for,
yes.
if not anything else, encouraging us and letting us know that the work is being done. And if you need support, there are experts that are doing it. Thank you guys so much for your time and being connected to this conversation. We will have you guys collaborating, collaborating with us soon and very soon, especially around special education, because we have a special education coalition in the National Parents Union bringing together a myriad of organizations across the nation to support families and communities. So we're super excited about this. Thank you guys so much again for joining our policy corner. Special announcement, guys. Special announcement. We want you to make sure you are registered for the upcoming second edition of the Let's Get Real Town Hall series. It is going to be focusing on something that everybody should love, which is numeracy, financial literacy, and of course, making sure that economic empowerment is happening for our families and our communities. We are super, super thankful for you all being with us on this evening. Now, I gave you that special announcement, but Tanya, guess what? We have another whammy for them. Boom. Save the date, because right after our next town hall, we are having a parent workshop on how we can drive policies around. You heard all of our participants talk about tutoring. Well, guess what? We're going to be talking up tutoring and how to make sure that the dollars are being connected to what our students need. So don't miss this conversation. You will see some of the same faces on our policy corner back again, because guess what? They're on the move doing this work, and it does not stop. So they will have more updates in May on what you can do to get connected. Tanya, thank you so much for helping facilitate an amazing conversation this evening.
It's been my pleasure.
Stories were shared, and I appreciate it. I want to give you a few moments just to close us out with any final words that you may have.
Wow, I've been informed. I said it, I think I typed earlier. This was so rich, informative, empowering, and impactful. You could not have been on this town hall tonight and not learn something. Thank you to the parents and everyone in the chat that was transparent in sharing their story and their journey. And I'm going to say one quick funny thing. My middle son was in the 9th grade, and I was told that I had to come to an SST meeting or they would have one with or without me. The funny thing happened that my son also came, my husband friend, now my ex-husband came, and we were in the meeting when my 9th grader started advocating for himself. And the SST coordinator jumped up and said, "Which one of you teachers called for an SST meeting for this child? Did y'all get the wrong child?" So when we talk about helping our children to find their voice early, keep advocating, parents. You are doing the best you can with what you have, and you are doing great. Help your students to find their voice early so that they can continue to advocate for themselves. And that was my little funny. We cracked up, we laughed, and then he asked if he'd leave early, and we took him to lunch. So yes, keep fighting the good fight. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you to National Parents Union for putting these town halls on. And thank you, Jason, for, as you say, allowing me to run my mouth with you tonight.
Thank you so much, guys. Listen, I'm excited about our upcoming conversation. You guys will get a chance to meet our New York State Director, Ashara Baker, who is going to be an intricate part of this conversation around financial literacy and numeracy. If you are not connected to the National Parents Union, I'm telling you, Go ahead and join us today. We are growing
free.
leaps and bounds, and we are bringing parents, allies, everyone to the table to help us make change for our children. Everyone is late. We hope you get some rest. We thank you so much for a powerful conversation. We're going to have the information up for you. But as always, thank you for supporting the work of the National Parents Union. And again, have a great evening. Thank you all so much. We'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.